I often get the question, what neurolinguistic programming books do I recommend? And I answer that question the same way every time. I say, read anything by Steve and Connirae Andreas, books they wrote together and books that they wrote separately. You will get the best, clearest NLP information you can possibly get from their books. And I also say that they wrote the first readable books of NLP. Before them, the books read like engineering manuals, and there was not a real human side to it. And Stephen Connirae brought that human side. And so I'm super excited to be doing this live stream with a special guest, Connirae Andreas. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Damon. I'm looking forward to having this opportunity to talk together today. Yeah, I've
Awesome.
known you for many years now, and you always have interesting questions. So let's see what comes out.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met you, we had these great conversations. I would ask so many questions and you were tireless about answering them. I thought for sure you were going to be like, okay, can you just leave me alone? And you never did. And you answered all of them. So I was very grateful for that. I
Your
also want to
your
say this.
enthusiasm for learning and for NLP was obvious right from the beginning. Yeah,
Thank you.
which
Yeah.
I always appreciate. A kindred spirit there.
Definitely. Yeah. Speaking of that, your enthusiasm for NLP hasn't waned at all. And what we're talking 40 plus years, you've been not only a pioneer in the field, you've been a developer. And I would go even further than that and say you're actually a living legend in the field of NLP. So you have been pretty consistent through decades of developing NLP and taking NLP where I thought NLP couldn't go. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yes,
Yeah.
sounds
Okay,
good.
so speaking of that, before we launch into this, I already see people making comments here, and we will answer your questions. So feel free to ask those questions. You might want to wait until the end to ask those questions because if you ask them now, that means I have to scroll back through and try to find your question. So it's much easier for me at the end of this if you start asking those questions. And like I said, we will dedicate some time at the end of this to answer your questions, and I hope you have plenty of them because Connie Ray is tireless, it seems like, when answering these questions. So I want to start a little bit with your history of how did you come across this thing called neurolinguistic programming, and how did it take off for you?
Yeah, I was a graduate student at the time in a clinical psychology program in Boulder, Colorado, studying clinical psychology. That was my career plan. And I was ready. Steve and I had already met sometime earlier, about almost 2 years earlier, when we both learned about NLP. And it happened when we were at a conference in California. It was a conference on Gestalt therapy and humanistic psychology. And suddenly, this guy showed up, a colleague of my husband's who was in Gestalt. And he said, there's this crazy new thing called neurolinguistic programming. He started telling us about it. And it sounded too good to be true, but it would be so great if it was true. So we got curious, and Steve and I booked the very first training that we could find in neurolinguistic programming. And that was with someone that one of your mentors also, Greg Brodsky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the beginning for us. And then from there, we just kept learning more. We dove right in. Um, I found in NLP, I felt like NLP offered something that had been missing from my graduate training in clinical psychology. I really respected my teachers, my mentors in clinical psychology. I was in one of the best. It had a reputation. It was one of the top graduate programs in clinical psychology in the country, and yet, when I found NLP, I felt like, this is something that's been missing so far. NLP was all about specific experience. It was about things you could test in the moment. It was about understanding the structure of our experience and how that would make possible change in an easier and more reliable way. All that sounded great to me. So
Yeah.
I was quite interested. And so my husband, if anything, had an even stronger interest right from the beginning. He was going, "This is it. Let's just everywhere there's an NLP training." And at that point, there wasn't very much NLP training. Anywhere the developers were offering a training that was 4 days or more, anywhere in the country, Steve and I were there.
Yeah, well, that explains why you guys got so good at it so fast, and were able to interpret that. A question for you about your studies. So you were already a psychology student, and when you say that NLP offered something that was missing, would you say that what you were studying was more theoretical, and NLP brought more of a practical application to psychology?
That's one way to say it. My graduate program, I had selected a graduate program that did have clinical training experience. I was already being a therapist in the room in our graduate clinic where people would come in, and so we were getting experience, but we didn't have any clear. There were no clear protocols for what to do.
Mm,
So you and it was more considered an art, and there's a good side to that, but also a downside. It's like um, it took people years and years and years to develop expertise, and when they would begin to intuitively sense what was helpful to people and what was not. So then you had people like Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir. And Fritz Perls, these people who were the models for developing NLP,
mm,
they had years. It took them over decades of their career. They refined their intuitive knowledge about what to do, and in some cases, they did like Milton Erickson was pretty precise in his work also, but he
mm,
didn't map out. He never got the place where he mapped out protocols that other people could use to reliably make change. So that was something unique from NLP, that the and it sometimes it sounded constraining to people at the beginning. What do you mean a protocol, a step by step thing? I just want to get in there and and have empathy and understand. And I came to my own sense of it is the empathy. It's important being present with someone, listening, all of these things, they're important. They're never not going to be important to have people meeting face to face, to experience this field of kindness, perhaps between you and your coach or your therapist, whatever it is. Um, that's still really important. But then, in addition, I think NLP brought for the first time a recognition that there is a structure to change, that if we can understand the underlying structure, we can just help people so much faster, so much more. So the kindness can actually be delivered in a way that matters to people, where they feel the results in their life. So, somebody who's been depressed for many years, or they've been grieving, or they have envy or hurt or anger that doesn't go away. You know, yes, they're going to be happy to be have someone empathize with them, but they'll be even happier if they feel like, oh, it's not a problem anymore.
mm.
This experience has changed in my life. So that's what NLP started being able to deliver. And that's what was not present in psychology up until that time. We had Rogerian therapy already. We were all about you sit, you listen, you reflect back. You know, that's nice as far as it goes, really nice. Then we had transactional analysis where they had the parent, adult, and the child. But again, it's very vague in terms of what you actually do to provide change for people. There was psychoanalysis, and there the idea was that you would spend decades in therapy and you would just make really small changes. So I was really being taught, you know, you're planting seeds with what you do with a client. You're planting seeds and you're hoping that they'll sprout and grow into something. And then I thought, well, that's nice. But with NLP, we started having the recognition that perhaps we can be more precise about it. It would be like if a chemist thought, or I don't know what do you call someone who knows how to start fires, But if we just had, just sit with the wood and reflect back to it, hold a nice
Yeah.
space, provide the love. But if you understand the physics of it, if you understand the properties of what actually creates a fire, then you know how to do it in a reproducible way, a safe way, a way that you can use for warmth, for cooking food, and so on. And in the same way, NLP brought this possibility of change in a way that's reliable, that anyone can experience it.
That's a wonderful explanation. I already feel like I'm going to be sending this live stream out once we have the recording done, that when people ask about, what is NLP, and that was a beautiful explanation of that. I want to, you told me a wonderful story. I mean, it might have been 20 minutes into me meeting you when I picked you up at the airport that very first time. And you brought up Greg Brodsky because I asked you, how did you come across NLP, or how did you start teaching? And you brought up Greg Brodsky, and I was like, I know Greg. And you told a quick but sweet story about how he inspired you to start teaching.
Ah, yes, yes. I always remember Greg with a lot of fondness because he was instrumental in Steve and I beginning our teaching of NLP together. When Steve and I met, Steve was older than me. He was 18 years older. And that, to me at the time, I thought, oh, that's way too old to become romantically involved. I thought that's never going to work. So I had to get over the age gap thing, but we had an instant connection and a rapport and a respect for each other that felt like very equal from the beginning. But nonetheless, our this personal sense of equality, he had 18 years on me in terms of his experience in the field. He was already a Gestalt therapy expert. He'd worked with Fritz Perls. He'd published books in Gestalt therapy. He'd been a Gestalt therapy trainer and author and so on. And me, I was a graduate student in clinical psychology. so so I didn't consider that my expertise as a potential trainer to be on par with his. But right from the beginning, we invited Greg. Fairly soon, we invited Greg Brodsky to teach a training in NLP for us in Colorado, because we realized we really want to learn this. So the easiest way for us to do this is, in addition to traveling around, if we bring people who are already skilled in NLP, bring them to Colorado, to Boulder. If we sponsor trainings there, then we can keep learning ourselves. So Steve used to call it, it was our way to keep our habit going. And that was, so we brought Greg Brodsky there to teach for us, to teach an NLP workshop, the same methods that we learned from him in the Bay Area, but he already had more experience. So then after we said, we'd like to bring you back. And how about if Steve thought, well, how about if I teach how much I know first, and then you come and teach something that's more advanced than that. And Greg said, well, yeah, that's a good idea, except you and Connirae should both teach it together. Right away, he said that. And I don't know why he said that, but I think maybe he recognized something that I couldn't recognize in myself yet, which was that we were equals in NLP. We were learning it at the same time, and we were both absorbing it quickly. And then, so it was because of him that we both taught together from the beginning. And I've always appreciated that, because I would have never had the confidence to advocate for myself in that way. I didn't trust that I had the ability. But since Greg did, we both taught that first training together. And then it was history. We taught the first training, and right away, it confirmed, I think it confirmed for both of us that this was the right way to go, that we could be a good partnership team. And there were times in that very first workshop that Steve and I taught together when somebody said, this happened twice in the workshop. Somebody asked a question. I said, well, what about blah, blah, blah? I don't remember the question anymore. I think something about anchoring. And Steve said, well, we don't really know the answer to that yet. We're just beginners, blah, blah, blah. But I did know the answer. And And so I just said, well, what I think is the answer. And I offered it, and the person goes, yeah. And Steve was going, yeah, that makes sense. We were all going, yeah, that makes sense. And that happened twice in that first workshop. So that gave me more confidence. Okay, each of us, each of us, us working as a team worked really well, because what one of us didn't know, the other one likely did.
Mm,
It went both ways. If I
yeah.
didn't know something, most likely Steve would have an idea. And if he didn't know something, most likely I would have an idea. So it was a good partnership where we could learn from each other.
Isn't it amazing how just sometimes those little what seems like a little choice, a direction, something new, and how much that can absolutely change the direction of our lives. And so from that point on, you were an NLP teacher, and that became your career and your livelihood. And what I want to say too is, for anyone watching, if you have not taken a course in person or through the internet with Connirae Andreas, you should absolutely do that. You will learn so much. She is an extraordinary teacher, and in fact, we're having her teach a workshop for us in my community. And if you're in one of my memberships, you can have access to this live training that we'll be doing next week. So this is not something like we're selling or promoting that way. If you're a member of one of my memberships, you automatically get to attend for free, and it will be recorded, so you can also watch it later if you can't show up at the time. So, if you want to be if you want to be there for this training next week, you can enroll in any one of our trainings, and you'll have access to that. So I just want to, you've already mentioned meeting Steve, and I wanted to just ask you a little bit more about that. What was that like the first time you met him? When I think you were going to a lecture about Gestalt therapy that he was giving. Is that how it started?
Yes, we met in 1975, and that was a long time ago now. We This was in Estes Park. This was 2 years before we learned about NLP, and it was at a time when, well, it was at a Gestalt therapy conference, another one of those. Steve had organized it. Actually, he was the organizer, and he presented there. I didn't know him, but kind of sort of an interesting tidbit. My undergraduate senior thesis was based on one of the ideas in Steve's book Awareness. So I knew of him, and I had familiarity with Gestalt therapy, but I'd never met him. So when some friends of mine, some graduate school friends of mine, and I uh, were interested in this Gestalt therapy, so we decided to go to this conference at Estes Park. And that's where I met him. That actually did not stand out so much to me. It's interesting how, when you have a couple meeting, what is the moment of meeting that matters to each person? And it's not always the same for one as the other. And when I talked to Steve about this many years later, he said that his first recollection of meeting me was up there in Estes Park, and there was this woman and he said it was like there was a golden glow around her head, and it turned out to be me. So the sunlight must have been coming through my hair, or something like that. And I did have blondish hair at the time. Now my hair is a bit on the grayish side, but so that was his first recollection, is this sort of glowing blonde coming towards him. and uh, and then my first recollection of him, where I felt like we really met, was he was doing a small training in Denver after the conference in Estes Park. And one of my good friends, also graduate student in clinical psychology in a different program from me, she convinced me to go. She said, "Oh, Connie Ray, it's this opportunity. I want to go. Come with me." This, like you said, Damon, it's these small things that change the course of someone's life, and this was another one of those. Because I almost didn't go, but then I did go with her, and then it was at that small training. It was several days in a row. And that's where I felt like I connected with Steve as a person, as a human being. not just as a Gestalt therapy person, but a person.
Mhm.
And I got a feeling of, in a way, I connected with him as he's just kind of like this big teddy bear. That's how I knew him,
Mhm.
as a big teddy bear. That
And
and
you were how old at the time?
Pardon?
You were how old at the time?
Then I was 21
21. And how old was he?
and 39.
39. That's what I thought, because I remember exchanging emails with him. So I was post-divorce. This was about 10 years ago. And so I was post-divorce and talking about falling in love later in life, which felt later in life for me at my late 30s. And he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "totally. I fell in love with Connirae at 39." And it was just like, I kind of took that as like a way to inspire myself to find the person I was looking for. It was just really
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I know you found such a wonderful
Definitely. Yeah.
partnership in your life now, so
Yeah. You're
yeah.
talking about 18 years difference. We're 20 years. And
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So similar
very
line.
similar. Yeah.
Oh, mm.
But you've met her. She doesn't come off as,
Yes,
we don't come
yes.
off as like there's a
No,
lopsided thing. Yeah,
you guys have your kind of equal partnership, which I
for
really
sure.
respect. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely forget that we're that far apart. It's amazing
Yeah,
how that happened.
yeah.
Yeah. So you and Steve start teaching NLP, and you become known for this, and you're doing your practitioner trainings and master practitioner trainings, and eventually you reach a point where you start developing something on your own, which became core transformation. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Well, that really came about because of, that came about it had to do with my relationship with Steve, actually, and with Milton Erickson. Those are the thread those are the background threads, and the fact that I always experienced myself to be a difficult client. This was true prior to NLP, and it was also true in NLP. I was excited to learn NLP, and yet I felt like, the changes other people have don't seem to happen for me. And then I was going through there it was in 1979, I think it was, the last year of Milton Erickson's life. I felt like Steve and I have been partners a while now. It's time for us to decide. Either we turn this into a life partnership, and it becomes here forward, we get married, we have a family together, the whole bit, or we decide, no, we love each other, we care for each other, but maybe this isn't the right life partnership for us. So, but I really did not know which choice to make. It felt agonizing to even try to decide, because I loved this man. I knew that, but I felt like certain things were off in our relationship. So nothing felt like the right thing. So then I had the opportunity to visit Milton Erickson for one of his week-long teaching seminars. That's what he called them, I guess. We just we just signed up for a week with Erickson. Me and Steve wasn't there that time. We had gone together earlier. This time I was there. Several friends of mine were there also, and some people I didn't know. It was a group of about 10 or 12 therapists. But I went with this decision in the back of my mind and feeling really anxious about, how am I going to decide what's the right choice? And so I went and asked him if he would work with me privately. And then I think I won't take the time to tell the whole story here, unless you really want me to go into the detail. But Milton Erickson did his thing, which I wasn't recognized at the
Mhm.
time. He definitely got me. I was Because I asked, "Will you work with me privately?" And he says yes, but then he turns away and he doesn't make an appointment. So I'm feeling confused. And that whole week, I was there for the whole week, half a day each day. And each day I would be sort of like, okay, do I get my chance to work with him privately? Or yes, maybe. And then it's like the hope is pulled out. Um, and my hope would be sort of dashed, and I would be disappointed. And I go, okay. And then finally, on the very last day, like, after trying, thinking like he went through telling us how he lost his license for doing individual work. He couldn't do it anymore. And then I thought maybe he means he'll work with me as a demo person, but he never did. And then finally he did, but demo doesn't go anywhere. So again, hopes building up, hopes crashed, hopes building up, hope crashed. Finally, on the last day, I thought I'd best just give up on getting anything from Dr. Erickson and for myself, and I'll just see what I can learn from whatever he might be doing with other people. And as everyone who's studied Milton Erickson knows, he's never just he's telling his stories about his clients, but it's never just those stories. It's always he's always doing things. It's always part of the way he's bringing about unconscious change with somebody, maybe several people in the room. So I was watching him mark things out and thinking that I understood. And then it's like a half an hour or an hour and a half, something like that, into the session. Suddenly there was this wave of something that came over me, a wave of well-being, we could call it. Basically, I felt like I was a completely different person than I'd ever felt before. I had never felt that kind of complete well-being, a kind of peace that's beyond, words, the sense that everything's okay, the way I was feeling it in that moment. And then, and he looked at me at that moment and he said, "And your unconscious mind has just made an important decision." And I thought, okay. But the thing is, I felt the well-being, but I had no idea what to do about, do I get married to Steve or not? I still didn't know what was the right choice. But somehow I didn't care that I didn't know. I knew that I would know whenever I needed to know, that somehow I would know what to do when the right time came.
Mhm.
So I went home, had this feeling of well-being, and then there was this percolating inside me for several weeks that was happening. I didn't know what it was. It was an unconscious thing. And then it became clear what I needed to do. And that was, I got clear there were 3 things that needed to be in place for the relationship to work from my end. So I talked to Steve about it. I said, okay, these are the things that matter to me. How about for you? Is there fit for you? Because I really felt that if there wasn't a fit, we just needed to recognize that, and then we would go our separate ways.
Mhm.
And I wasn't worried about that, though. I trusted that that I would be fine, he would be fine, we would both be fine, whatever. We just needed to get clear on what was the right fit for us both. And then, you know what he decided, because we got married. We ended up getting married and having a long partnership. And so that all sounds good, right? But then the only problem was that within a few months of that, this well-being that I felt, everything's okay that I felt, it started unraveling. And pretty soon I was pretty much back to what I call my old neurotic self, And by that I mean I was back to the Connirae who wonders what are other worries about what other people are thinking, and it worries about, is this the right thing or not the right thing? That and that was all missing during that time when I had that feeling of okayness and well-being. There was just a trust in a knowing, really, that everything's fine. So when that fell apart, I was really devastated. I was not so pleased, and I really was looking for a way to get back to that. I knew it was possible now. I knew it was even possible for me, a tough client. And so I thought, okay, best way, I'll sign up for another week with Dr. Erickson, which I did. He was still alive. But then shortly before I was to visit him, he passed away.
Mhm.
So that meant I was on my own. And I am going to get back to core transformation here, Damon. It's basically, I tried everything I could think of. I asked other people who were there, did they have any idea what he'd done with me? Nobody had any idea. I tried to get a hold of the tapes. I couldn't make they were garbled. I could not understand them. I tried to go back into a trance, recall what happened. Got nothing from that either. So finally, what I did was I gave myself the task of working with. Thought, okay, I'm better at working with other people than with myself. So let me just ask for people who have tried everything on their life's biggest issue, including all the NLP things, whatever else, with their life's biggest issue, and nothing has worked. I'm going to invite them to come and do a session with me. And what I said to them is, the only thing I'm going to guarantee you is that I won't do anything I already know to do. That's the only thing I'm going to guarantee you ahead of time. I don't know what I'm going to do. But it won't be anything I already know. And you can go home when you have what you want. And then I would laugh. So that was kind of our contract with each other. I think that was my way of saying, we're going to follow some kind of deep guidance. I have no idea what I even mean by that, but we're going to somehow go to a deeper level, and something's going to happen. I kind of had that trust. So then, interestingly enough, with the very first person to come to me with that, under that condition, in the very first session, the core transformation process, it just came out pretty much word for word the way I ended up teaching it, the way it's in the book, the way I still teach it. It pretty much came out just that way right there. And I don't know how that happened, but I know it was based on a lot of background in NLP, a lot of experience working with the unconscious, um, a lot of tuning in to exactly the nuances of what someone says, the other person says, and the 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 implications or presuppositions in anything that I say back are really careful. So I slowed down the conversation so that I could be very mindful of each word of each sentence that I said to the other person. Each word was said with intention, and it quickly carried the person to something that it revealed. What those of you who with core transformation background, you understand this. It revealed the core state very quickly. That came out, and the core state, I recognized it right away when I saw it. The person changed state. I could see that right in front of me, that they were not just telling me the content of something. They were experiencing something profound. I could see it. And then right away, I knew what to do with that. And in retrospect, I realized that I drew upon some kind of a unique language patterns, a Connirae language pattern that came out of my work with clients that Steve and I had patterned out earlier, but it was a little different from that too. It had to be a little different to work as well as it does with the core transformation method. And that's where we get a method that can take someone from any starting feeling or behavior or thought pattern and reliably use that as the doorway to discover this often profound. Sometimes it feels ordinary, but often it feels profound. This experience like peace or well-being or okayness or love or oneness or something like that. And then the next phase of it brings that, utilizes that in a transformative way.
Yeah, I knew nothing about this model whenever I wanted to bring your son Mark here to Santa Cruz to teach it. And I thought, because I thought about you, but I also had remembered how much I would complain that these institutes were not giving the younger, newer teachers a chance. So I thought, well, this would be an opportunity to get to know Mark for one, because I was curious about him, and then to get to know this model. And so when I brought him, I was blown away. It was such an incredible model. It's a phenomenal model for everyone listening. If you haven't learned core transformation, make that part of one of your things that you put on your list to learn. And
That's
one of
right.
the things that blew my mind about it was that you use value solicitation in a model, whereas every practitioner training I had taken, we would learn value solicitation and then it would kind of like stop. And I'd be like, well, there seems like there's so much more to this. Why don't we learn more about it?
Yes,
And so
yes.
this was the first time I had seen a model that takes those values, which is generalizations about what's important to you, what's more important than what's important to you, and brings it forward in a way to really embody that. So I was so impressed with that's when I thought I want to find a way to take this into the self-concept model, which I did, and I feel like that's one of my contributions to teaching. When I teach self-concept, I teach it starting with a values elicitation and finding out what are what's really important to you, so that we can become those qualities. So not only did I use core transformation as a way to resolve some of my own issues, but I used it to inspire me in the work that I've done ever since.
Yes, yes, yeah. Thank you for sharing that background. And you mentioned Mark and teaching core transformation. I'll just mention too, we do happen to have a core transformation training coming up starting on the 24th, next Friday. And you can find that on our website at andreasnlp.com if you look under the trainings. And you can join in and experience it yourself if you like. And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun to say this, Damon, but Mark, I was just talking with Mark a few minutes before I got online with you, and he mentioned to me, he says hello, by the way, and he mentioned to me that you and your team is talking with Mark about possibly sponsoring another core transformation training with him.
Yes, we are.
So, yeah, okay, all right.
You are jumping the gun, but it's okay.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
haven't-
yeah. No, the
yeah,
dates aren't set yet, and I
yeah,
think it's not even set in stone yet if there's an agreement, but that's
yeah.
I
We've
said, "Oh,
decided we
that's
want to make.
wonderful, that would be
Yeah,
wonderful."
we've
Yeah,
decided we want to make this work. I think it's just a great way to bring together because I feel like we're doing such similar things. There's all the parallels. So the more we can maybe put less distance between us and what we're doing as and teaching, the better. So yeah, we're working on that. We just don't have it all hammered out yet. But yeah, that's coming.
yeah, yeah. So if Tamara's date Tamara is the person teaching the training coming up, this Friday, and if
Mhm.
you wanted to attend and can't do that one, then that it may be possible something possibly as early as January that with Mark, or possibly in June. But I'll see. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so those are future possibilities, and yeah, I was surprised also. I guess I was both surprised and not surprised. That's
About
the
what?
way with these kind of things. With how much the that particular method got profound change for people. So the first person it worked with, so I remember walking out of the room, and then my husband was in an office sort of across the hall. And this was all in our home that this is happening, and I'm telling him about it, and I didn't have confidence at that point that I wasn't sure if this was a one-off or if this was a pattern. So then I thought, okay, the next person that comes in, I'm going to, rather than, I'm going to try running the same thing. I'm going to pattern out what I did with this person, try running the same thing and see if it gets the same results. And it did. It, in fact, did. And I got a little bit of refinement in how to word it, how to make it as um, generic, as universal as possible. So I did that with the next 12 people, 12 people total. And it was quite interesting because out of these people, at that point, I was thinking of it as a one session intervention. That's how we had been taught NLP. It's like, okay, yeah, you do these things, it's a one session intervention, and you're done. And over time, I realized that core transformation is a deep enough method that it's worth doing more than once.
For
And that
sure.
when, with some issues, like I've had people who say, I've gotten over my chronic depression with core transformation, but it didn't happen in one session. I did it every day for 100 days, or sometimes some people said I did it every day for 2 years. One person told me that. And they were thrilled because finally something worked for them.
Mm.
So, but even just doing it with one session with a whole range of issues, and I called each person up afterwards to see how is it now? Did it last for 2 weeks, a month? Is it still what's it like now? And out of those 12 people, let's see if I can get this right, if I might get my numbers to add up. I haven't gone over this in a little while, but it was I believe it was 4 people who said everything is different. It was a profound change, and everything is different. And then, yeah, that's how it was. The 5 people said, they described changes going beyond just what they worked with. Profound, that was profound, but also lots of things in my life have changed for the better. And then 5 people said subtle but profound. So it was less dramatic for them, but they still tended to use words like profound to describe this change. And then 3 people, does that come up with 12 now? Yeah, that works out. 3 people said, no difference. I didn't notice anything.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, if I can get not 75% of people on their life's biggest issue made a profound, significant, even profound change
Mm.
in one session, that's pretty amazing. And then what I didn't know at the time, so I didn't tell the remaining 3, I didn't tell them this, but what I learned later is that, okay, if it doesn't work the first time, there's still a really good chance it can and will work if you stick with it, and
Mm.
especially if you have a good coach, a trained coach. So,
So
um,
75% of people, and that was based on one session?
yes, yes. Now that's a very small first set. That's out of the first 12 people. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that would hold up in.
No, but that's amazing to think of that. On a first session, 75% of the people had
Yeah.
profound changes.
I
Yeah, that's
thought so. That
amazing.
was that was yeah, yeah. And we do have research on core transformation now, a lot of research that does show, I think it's and this is with people we've trained. So it's not me, not Mark, not Tamara, it's the
Mm.
people we have trained. And it shows that they are able to get really pretty amazing results too. So,
That's amazing.
and there's 2 published studies already, and one is a randomized, it's an RTC, randomized controlled,
Mm.
blah, 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 whatever that is.
Mhm.
So 2 published studies and more research that is submitted for publication on that.
Cool. All right, so I want to move this a little faster because I want to make sure we have time to
Yeah,
answer
let's do
questions.
that.
Uh, so I don't know if I ever told you this. I think I told you this. I had a long background in non-duality before coming to NLP.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I credit that with one of the ways in which I learned NLP very quickly because you're coming, when you have that sort of understanding of non-dual perspective and that beliefs aren't actually real, that there's something we create, it made it a lot easier to learn NLP because I could see that a lot of people were still, when in my first NLP training, they were still struggling with like this idea that a belief isn't real. And they're like, well, how can that be? Of course it's real. And I'm like, no, it's, and I would try to help explain it. One of the things that fell short for me in non-duality was like, okay, I feel at peace and I can experience the non-dual awareness, but I have bills to pay, I have kids to provide for, like I have some problems that I need to solve, financial problems. And it's like, it's not really helping me solve those problems. And eventually when I found NLP, it was like, that was exactly the piece that I was looking for that was missing. And as I was learning NLP, I would even say, like, well, and people would ask me about non-duality and what's the difference between non-duality and NLP. I'd say, well, NLP can't really go to the realm of the non-dual now until I met you and coming to wholeness. And I was like, I was wrong. Uh, you can actually bring NLP into that non-dual realm, and you successfully did do that with this model. And I have not seen that in any other NLP model ever, like not even close. So let's talk about coming to wholeness. And by the way, for those of you watching who are interested in the workshops you will be teaching next week for my membership, it will be this coming to wholeness. It'll be not the whole training, but it'll be a shorter version of it. And so I highly, highly recommend this. And this was the first training that I attended of yours. And I was just like, wow, okay. What I thought was possible, what I thought was impossible has now just been shown to me to be possible. So how did you
Yeah,
come
I
up with?
like how you've introduced that. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And by the way, there will also be I have a level one, a full wholeness work level one training starting in November 4th for those who want to go the distance with it. And but let's get into and that's live online. You can again, that's on the andreasnlp.com website. You can find that. So how did I get to wholeness work from core transformation? When I had core transformation at first, I thought, this is all I'm going to need, if I just keep doing this. And I did it as a personal practice for quite a few years and got benefit from that. Um, and then something happened in my life. Basically, I had a health crisis this time where I thought I won't go into all the details because for time, so we can get to your questions, but I thought I was dying. I really thought I was dying. And I had this experience of like surge of electricity going up my central column. And I thought, this is so intense. I could not do anything. I couldn't think. I couldn't sleep. It disrupted my digestion. I couldn't really do much of anything except for sit in a quiet room and hope that somehow the electricity would let up. But it didn't. So basically, to make the story short, after trying lots of things from going to doctors to alternative health professions, I didn't die off right away. So I had the chance to explore some possibilities that might save me and help me get over this. But the doctors didn't know what to make of it. The alternative health professionals, most of them also said, I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what this is. And a couple of them could help. The ones who were very, very sensitive, there were a couple of those who could help settle my system temporarily, but it didn't shift what was happening. So I kept trying to find something, some kind of answers and help. And then what made it possible for me to, in the end, do what you described, Damon, of like modeling, using the NLP background to model the area of the non-dual. I did not set out to do that. It was more that I was desperate to survive. And I thought, if I'm going to survive, my best chance is likely to let go of everything I know, even including core transformation, let go of just everything I know and open myself to something new. And I had, and to being taught, to learning, to discover something. So, and the place that I started looking is I thought, where am I going to find these answers? I don't know. I've already looked in psychology. I've already looked into NLP, but I've not explored spirituality. So I started, not seriously. Of course, I was familiar with some of the stuff that we all can't not hear about, but I hadn't really explored it in depth. So I started doing that. And I was most interested in not so much teachers who would wax on and on about theoretical stuff. I was interested in teachers who would describe personal experiences of transformation. And they called it awakening. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. They're calling this thing awakening. It seems to be this fundamental shift in consciousness that where you feel this kind of well-being. That sounds kind of like what I experienced for a while in Dr. Erickson's office. He didn't call it spirituality, but it was the experience that I had. And I began being curious about what could there be a pathway to this that anyone could follow? Because I was noticing we could sit in these in songs in spiritual circles and have a warm, loving experience, and maybe the teacher is kind and loving, and it was lovely to just bask in the presence of someone like that. I really value and enjoyed that. But I also noticed that it didn't necessarily change people how they went home. People still often had the same issues with their spouses, with their kids. They're with stress. They would get triggered emotionally. So I began to that's what led me. At some point, I turned inward and did the first wholeness work exercise, which I will be teaching in that session that you described, Damon. And yeah, and it's also, it's also in this book, The Wholeness Work Essential Guide, Level One Healing and Awakening. It's
Yeah, I
all.
highly recommend the book. I've read it, and it's amazing. And that really, when I read that book, I had already done your training. When I read that book, it was really when it drove home how extraordinary this model is. And like I said, you know, I've I've spent a lot of time with non-duality teachers, and they, I would say, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you? And they would just, well, it's just the understanding. And I was like, okay, I need steps here, like, and I wasn't quite getting it. And then, I turned to NLP, and it's all about steps. It's all about process. And I'm like, yes, this is so refreshing. This is what I needed. And then I couldn't see the bridge between the two of this sort of non-dual understanding and NLP until you're this model, which it's amazing that you were able to sort of model that and have steps to do this. And it's a wonderful thing to, even if you just do it like as a meditation every morning, it's just wonderful. You just go into that non-dual sort of state, and if anything arises, then you can integrate it. And it's yeah, it's a phenomenal model.
Yeah.
And
And
so
it's
go ahead.
I like how you've described it. Yeah, yeah, and I think, yeah, it's even it go I go more into it in the book too, where because at first people kind of go, well, these exercises seem so simple, you know, how could this possibly make that much difference? And yet it does. For some people, it starts off subtle. It's a little bit of sneaky way, a sneaky way to approach awakening or enlightenment, or just, we don't have to call it that. We can just call it well-being. You want to
Yeah.
have more well-being, more trust, more ease in life. Okay,
Mhm.
it's a nice way to slide into that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, before we get into the questions, I just want to mention again, if you're a member of one of my programs, you will be able to attend this training for free that Connirae will be doing next week. And if you're wondering, like, what are the trainings that we do, one of the trainings that I have is the Ultimate NLP Practitioner, which is, I believe it's still only $97 a month. So it's super inexpensive to join it. It is a membership with a community and all that. And by the way, the material I used was Stephen Connirae's practitioner training material. And I used that specifically because I knew that it was probably going to be the best material I could ever get my hands on. And I was absolutely right about that. It is the most complete practitioner training I've ever come across. Yeah, it's only $97 a year to join this program. And then you get all these wonderful workshops that we do with all these wonderful trainers like Connie Ray when we bring them in. And yeah, I got to say too, whenever I first went to teach that practitioner training material, I had already taken 3 other practitioner trainings from different teachers. And so I thought, oh, I've got this. And then when I cracked that manual, I was like, oh, I don't know if I have this. There was so much more to it than any other practitioner training I'd ever attended. So I had to kind of teach myself as I went along first, and then teach the material. Of course, I already had a background in NLP, so it made that process faster. But I was amazed at how detailed and incredibly encompassing that practitioner training material is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you've been making use of that, Damon, and found,
Yeah.
Steve and I spent years and hours organizing that. That for a while, that was our calling, to try
Mm.
to make, we tended from the beginning, I think both of us, to think about, okay, how can we add value? Yeah, this is what already is existing. How can we add value? And we saw early on a need for more systematic training materials, so we tried to map that out. And it's nice to hear you're making use of that.
Well, I want to say also too that one of the brilliant things that you and Steve did with this material, which was also, I think, you see this brilliance in the book that you edited, Transformations, where you brought Grinder and Bandler together, where you brought both of their styles together without it seeming like one was opposing the other. It's like you couldn't even tell necessarily who was, which style this came from, but I had some spent some time with Grinder style and spent some time with Bandler style, and I was like, wow, this is so merged together to really to take the best of both of their styles because they're so different, especially now the way they teach is so different.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so you did that in the practitioner training, you did that in the book Transformations, which by the way is probably one of the best books ever on hypnosis.
Ah, thanks,
Out
thanks
there.
for that recommendation. And I have to acknowledge, back in the early days, uh, Bandler and Grinder, they each already had their unique styles, like you are saying, and yet when they co-taught, some of that material is from when they co-taught, and when they co-taught, they could finish each other's sentences, and that
Mm,
became so. So they uh, and Steve and I modeled after them actually
mm.
in doing that. Um, they were already starting to go their separate ways and not finish each other's sentences anymore, but we still had those recordings from when they were doing it that way, and so we used that as a role model for our own teaching style of our own partnership.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I said, it's the best practitioner material I've ever come
Yeah,
across, and it was such a privilege to get your permission to use that material to teach it for a practitioner training. And that's what I always wanted to do is do this like big 24-day practitioner training. Like, because I realized that when I was taking practitioner trainings, I was like, something's missing here. And I would have conversations like with Judith Delozier, and so she would finally say, well, the trainings were a lot longer back in the early days. And so there was a lot that was missing. And then when I found your material, I was like, this is what was missing. It was like really put all the pieces in place.
yeah,
All right. Well, let's get to some questions.
yeah. Let's do.
Let's
I'd love
see.
to hear what people are asking about.
Let's see. So the first one I come across is by Declan. He says, I'm wondering why modern psychology hasn't accepted modalities like NLP besides lack of research, or has that changed? Yeah, that is a common thing
Yes,
that
yes,
comes up.
yes, yes. I think a lot of us are attempting to bring about a change there. I think part of the reason um, that standard what did you call it, Declan? The
Why modern
standard
psychology hasn't
modern
accepted.
psychology, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mainstream, that's how I usually think about it. Mainstream psychology has not accepted NLP. There's a number of reasons. From everything from at the beginning, Bandler and Grinder um, sort of positioned NLP by insulting
Yeah.
the current clinicians and sort of treating them like they're idiots. And it's not a way to get rapport, let's just say.
No.
But it did it did position NLP strongly and kind of got people's attention. So it was really good for that. But it not surprisingly alienated the people in the field. And the thing is, there have always been good people in the field, and like my teachers, I have a lot of respect for my back in my graduate school. So it's not like we don't need to be insulting people to bring in something new and just go, here's something, it's new, we think it has something to offer, take a look, see what you think. That
Right.
approach will work a little bit better.
I think
If you
so.
want to. Then the other thing is that NLP became affiliated or connected, or some of the people teaching NLP sort of got a reputation for sleaze, to
Mm,
just put it bluntly. So if you have an NLP trainer who's talking about use NLP to get women into bed with you, this does not bode well for mainstream acceptance in the field of psychology. It makes the whole thing look like a sort of a sleazy scam art type thing.
mm,
So that's unfortunate, but it's happened. And
mm.
so now I think there are a number of people in NLP who are attempting, people with integrity, who are attempting to differentiate and go, here's clean NLP. Here's what NLP is meant to be. So
No,
yeah,
it's like anything else. I mean, if you use it to deceive or to hurt or to, be so self-absorbed that you lack compassion and sympathy, then I mean, anything that you use with those with that combined with it is not going to turn out well for anyone. So yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, and I see here. Can I just go ahead? I'm kind of seeing I can look at chat too.
Okay, go
Shall
for
I
it.
go ahead? Yeah, Declan also has this question. Can Connirae say what are the applications of the model and or the effects? And that's a great question. And I realized I didn't really say much about this. With core transformation, I think I already described, you can use that with pretty much any feeling, behavior, or thought pattern that you want to change. It's it's if you it's the one it's a universal method. It just works with a lot of things. So you can, if you want one method that will make a difference with a lot of people, that's a good one. And it's pretty easy to get results even as soon as one session. That's a good one. Now with wholeness work, it's different. In a way, I consider that wholeness work goes to a little bit of deeper level, and here's some things it's especially good with. It's also really a universal method. It's universally applicable, and but it's especially good at reducing stress, calming the nervous system, transforming. People have used it to transform or heal emotions that they have tried everything else with, and somehow there's a little residual still left. And wholeness work somehow gets to this really deep level where it's hard to talk about, but easier to experience. And things get released, and things that have been sticking for decades are evaporate. So one client of Tamara's put it this way. She said, Tamara, core transformation has changed for me everything I knew needed healing. And then wholeness work has helped me heal everything that I didn't even know needed healing. So it helps people sleep better. Many people report, whoa, I'm getting more rest from my sleep. It's just easy and natural. I'm not waking up so often. Um, Also, people feel more present in their body, easier to connect with. And they say, my relationships are working better. I'm more connected. It's an easier time being intimate. Those are a few examples. I hope that helps. Do you want to pick a question now, Damon?
Yeah, well, here's just a statement I thought was really nice from Alina. She says, "I've absolutely loved every class I've ever taken with Connirae Andreas and NLP, or the Andreas NLP." So,
Oh,
that's nice.
thank you, Alina. Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's see. Okay, so I get this one a lot, and I have my way of answering this, and it'd be interesting to hear your way of answering it. I'm not going to even try to pronounce. I'll just say Zelfon or Zel.
Okay.
Says, what does Connie Ray now think of the self-concept model compared to the wholeness process?
Ah, I'm gonna just give a short answer on that. Like we hear the self-concept model, as you know, and probably most of your community knows. That was my husband's, Steve's. It was his baby, shall we say, his creativity or his design. He really liked that model. It was sort of the epitome of his work. That and the six-spined elephants work. And I know we get people coming from you, Damon, who've said, "Wow, this has really changed my life. It's changed a lot of things for me. I've been able to get X, Y, and Z results." So I know that it works, and I think both Steve and I found, like, Steve was always going. He recognized the value for what I do, but he was kind of going, that doesn't quite fit for me. It just doesn't feel like my style. It's not who I am. Um, and I've it's just so to some extent, I think we each have a different style, and self concept really came out of his looking for what is the deeper level of change, and core transformation and wholeness work, they come out of my search for a deeper level of change. And if I'm going to describe how I think of it intellectually, the difference is like the self concept model is it changes how we think about ourselves, and that shifts that shifts lots. And then the wholeness work, what that does is it dissolves the self who does the thinking. So it results in us coming to this kind of presence that's at a different level of experience, we could say. That's how I would describe it.
And in saying that, so for people who are listening who haven't done both models, that might sound contradictory. It's not. The models are 100% compatible. They work so
Yes.
well
Oh,
together.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're totally compatible.
Yeah, and I think there
Yeah.
is something there about personality, like the self-concept model. Just it's everything to me. Like it was exactly what I was looking for. Like when Steve said, finally, after I hit him with 1,000 questions, he goes, "I think I know what you're looking for," and he said, "This, try this," and I was like, "Oh wow, this is exactly what I was looking for."
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think there is an element of personality. So like non-duality is much closer to the wholeness model. And while I love non-duality, it's so useful to me even to this day, and so is the wholeness work. There's just something missing for me without that extra piece of what the self-concept model does for me. And for some people, that's not the case. For some people,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
get
yeah.
everything
I
they need
think
from other stuff.
it can be good for each person to check out, anything that someone tells you, Zelfon, me, Damon, whoever. It's with this kind of work, it's important to, in the end, if you can, explore it for yourself to discover what feels like the answer for me. And
Exactly.
so I always encourage that. And Steve, I think he would agree with what you're saying, Damon. And he felt like I think the self concept model was something that worked for him also.
Yeah.
And he also found, he was willing to try my weird, crazy stuff sometimes,
Mhm.
even though it seemed a little like, what do you mean, the space of awareness that's everywhere at once? What do you even mean? I mean, he would kind of argue with me at first about it. So he helped me clean up the language and make it as non as non-airy fairy as possible. Help so that it's because it's the wholeness work is meant to be really an opening of experience, not based on belief systems. And usually, when people have studied non-duality, it's a belief. They've studied it as, at least in part, as a philosophy or a belief system.
Mhm.
And with wholeness work, I teach with a minimum of concepts and lead with experience. And
Yeah.
then what I find is that when people start going through the experience, they start sounding like spiritual teachers. I'm
Mhm.
not kidding. Whether or not someone has any
Sure.
interest in spirituality, when they start making the shifts that we invite, okay, do step one, now do step two, and now do step three. And then they start saying things and going, okay, we could write that down and sell it as a spiritual teaching, because that's what it now sounds like. But it comes out of that person's experience. It's not comes out of a philosophy book somewhere.
Yeah.
So, and Steve was, I want to just say too, I appreciated that he was willing, even though my mode, the work that I was bringing, it wasn't his maybe natural state, but he was willing to give it a try. And for some things, he found, like he used to get pre-migraine auras, and that were kind of debilitating for him,
Mhm.
very unpleasant. And so one day he tried wholeness work for it. And I suggested it. So, I said, I don't think it can do any harm. It's likely to only take a few minutes, and you can either it does something or it doesn't do anything, but at least it won't cause any harm.
Mhm.
And he thought, okay, sure. I don't think it'll do anything, but I'll give it a go. And he tried it out, and like several minutes in, he's going, whoa, it's gone. It's just
Yeah.
gone. So
Mhm.
sometimes wholeness work has had an interesting and even immediate effect on things relating to the nervous system. So I have wonderings now. I don't really know, but I'm wondering if someone um, takes it seriously, starts early, and really works it over time. I'm
Mhm.
wondering if it might be able to either prevent or ameliorate or even reverse some serious nervous system conditions. And we don't have enough experience to really know that yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's the value I think here is remaining open to trying different models, different modalities, and give all of it a try. The great thing about wholeness work is that it's so accessible right from the start. Whereas with the self-concept model, unless you have a background in NLP, it kind of takes a little more experience doing more exercises and getting familiar with the model. And so, yeah, it takes a little bit longer. You have to spend a little more time, I think, with the self-concept model to really get the benefits of it. Whereas wholeness work, you can really access the benefits right away.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I'm going to say too, for me, with most people experience right away. I experienced something subtle right away, but me being a difficult client, it was very subtle at first.
Mm,
But the results are cumulative with that kind of work. It's the more I did, as I tried it, experimented with it more and more, I discovered, oh, the results I was feeling of like my nervous system settling, calming, resetting, reactivity in my relationships. I noticed it was super helpful in my relationship with my husband and other people too. But things
mm,
that used to trigger me or push my buttons, I would work the wholeness process with that. And I started to feel very, very different in our relationship. The things that used to bother me and plug me in, I didn't feel that way anymore. Didn't
mm,
seem to matter. Or sometimes it was just I was feeling fine and clear, and I knew I needed to say something, and so it's easier to say it
yeah.
from this place of just well-being, not a feeling of being wounded or hurt or something.
Mhm. Okay. Next question. How can wholeness work dissolve limiting beliefs, beliefs like I'm not lovable?
Okay, great question. Yes, yes. Um, every single time you do the wholeness work, it dissolves limiting beliefs. With wholeness work, we don't tend to need to map out which belief we're changing, because in a way that gives too much credit to the conscious mind, in my view. So what with wholeness work, what we do is find the unconscious experience of the limited self. We and The book and the various classes, they go into this more. But with wholeness work, we find the experience of limited self. The experience of limited self is where limiting beliefs reside. That's what maintains the limiting beliefs. That's how I think about it anyway at this point. So with wholeness work, we invite that to dissolve in a very specific way that feels like very much like if you had a hand in a fist for years and you forgot, it just got stuck that way, and gradually you invite it to release. It kind of feels that way, like that. So it feels literally relaxing to the system. And at the same time, limiting beliefs fall away. And I think it's kind of a good thing that we don't even need to know which limiting beliefs are dissolving. It's because we can get things melt away, and sometimes in retrospect we realize, oh, I used to think this, and now that doesn't. I realize that's not real. That's not really true.
Mhm,
We tend to impose lots of limiting beliefs about the world and about ourselves. If we impose the beliefs, and this helps them be released. This piece about I'm not lovable, that is addressed in wholeness work in the later part of the level one training. We get to the first structure of the unconscious that we find and heal is the limited self structure. Second structure of the unconscious that we find and heal is the inner authorities, and those have to do with feelings of unworthiness, self criticism, um, shame, embarrassment, lots of things like that. I start falling away in a really deep level. People who feel like, say, I've already worked these things, I've got it resolved, often notice, oh, now
mhm,
there's even more judgment that's been released that I didn't even really realize was there.
mhm,
And then the third structure of the unconscious that we find is the nurturing structures, the emptiness, loss, nurturing structures. And I apologize, I don't have a single word to describe that. Maybe I'll get one. Somebody will give me one. But this is what helps to fill in the lack or the missing unconditional love that we all wish we had but didn't necessarily get. Um, So this heals that. So it's sort of this third phase that is all part of the wholeness level 1 training, but we need to first learn how to dissolve the limited self and dissolve the inner authorities before we can really approach that and really have it and be able to the absorb the love. And then it becomes, we go one step beyond, am I lovable or not? Because that still is a dichotomy. I have to be loved by something outside myself in order to be validated, you
Hmm.
know. That all, by the way, core transformation just right away deals with that really directly. Someone can start with that, the part that feels unlovable,
Hmm.
and get really, in the very first session, get a shift on that most likely. With wholeness work, we can work that same territory, but we might do it the third session. Um, so with wholeness work, what we're doing is we're finding the structures of the unconscious that hold stress and limitations in place, and we're releasing those. So it's based on, and this gets back to this non-dual thinking, but it's based on the truth, we could say, or the understanding that each of us is, our essence is goodness. There's nothing wrong with any of us in terms of our essence. Our essence is already goodness. It's already, perhaps we could say, love itself or presence itself. Um, so what we're doing with something like wholeness work, we're not putting band-aids on our misunderstandings about ourselves, that we're not lovable, we're not okay, or something. That just adds layers
Yes.
to the force in the system.
Yeah.
Instead, we're finding the structures of the unconscious that hold this misunderstanding in place. This misunderstanding that I'm not lovable, and once that is, then we release it so that we more experience that it's just more that we are love. It's love exists. We don't have to be lovable.
Yeah, no, I'm really, it's really beautiful the way you explain that, because I try to explain to people, I'm not 100% against affirmations. I think it's possible to maybe have some affirmations that could be useful or just soothing. But in general, they didn't work for me, and actually they caused more problems, because just like what you were saying about Band-Aids, I was trying to just write over without, dealing with the fact of, like, I'm not the thing that I'm trying to tell myself that I am, looking in the mirror, trying to say this over and over and trying to convince myself. It would just create a lot more friction, a lot more problems.
Yeah,
So yeah, to let go of that and to realize, okay, well, let's get to the root of what's even causing this and just dissolve that and see through that it's not true. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
that's a great.
somebody,
Go
so somebody
ahead.
wasn't actually asking a question, but I can formulate this into a question. They were using wholeness work and they got a lot out of it, but it eventually stopped working. What would you say to someone
Oh,
who?
that's a great question. Love it. Yeah, or just comment. That happens for quite a few people. Like I just it always means it always means there's something that our unconscious is attempting to reveal to us, and we're not getting it. We're missing it. And that's natural. Everybody miss it. That's where it can be really helpful to go back to a class and or a really experienced coach. So let me give you an example. This last summer, I was teaching a training live in the Netherlands. I teach one live training in Europe each year. Um, and this was in the Netherlands. And someone came back again for the second year. And he said, I was so excited after the first. I was here last year. I was so excited. I was using it as a daily practice and really diving in. And then it just stopped working. So what's happening? And I said, okay, can I ask you a few questions? Because I don't know unless it's like he's the one who's going to actually tell me. So I asked him, what happens now that you're calling not working, you know? And so he was describing what was going on, and there were I can't remember exactly what it is, and it probably wouldn't be meaningful unless you've already been through wholeness training. But I could right away recognize in what he described what was likely an issue. So I just, oftentimes it's a reaction coming in and thinking it should be different than it is, or feeling frustrated. And we always, with wholeness work, we always have a way to include the reactions. And we don't bypass them. We don't try to talk ourselves out of them. We include them, and that sometimes is the important thing the unconscious wanted us to know and to notice, to acknowledge and transform the reaction. Because sometimes we each of us, I know I'm like this, and I assume many of us are. Um, I developed lots of patterns of thought inside, habit patterns, patterns for when to get frustrated, when to think things aren't working, to give up, you know. And these are the kinds of habit patterns of the unconscious that can start popping up. And with wholeness work, we do have a way to meet it. It's beyond it won't make sense if I tell you what to do without first you going through at least a few days of the training. So I won't go that far, but I just want you to know, um, I love it when people tell me that, because I go, oh, yeah, great. We can all learn from this, all of us, everybody, when we discover how is it something stops working, and then what do we need? What does that inform us that we need to notice, include? And it always tells us what we need to do next if we know how to listen.
Uh, when we were having email exchanges about doing this live stream, do you remember you were saying, well,
I was going, will we have enough to talk about for this long? Right, right. I'm going,
and I'm
okay.
thinking to myself, oh, come on, this is going to be so easy. Now we're more than an hour and 20 minutes into this, and we could keep going and going and going, but we do need to wrap this up. But I knew this was going to be a good time, and I knew you were going to have plenty to say, and I, I'm not out of questions, and that's not why we're wrapping this up. I always have more questions, so we'll have to bring you back on for another time. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate this. So for anyone looking to find out what are your next trainings, what would be the website for them to check?
I think easiest if you go to andreasnlp.com. So ANDREAS NLP.com. And
Mhm.
there you will see, look under wholeness trainings and core transformation trainings. And you'll see there's a core transformation training that's coming up already, starting next Friday, the 24th, I think it is. And that's, you'll go to trainings, look at core transformation. The whole next wholeness training you'll see under, it's Wholeness Live Online, and that starts in November 4th. Meets twice
Great.
a week, and we tried to make it a convenient time for as many time zones as we could. And I apologize to the people who for whom it's in the middle of the night. You can still get it through the recording. We do have some people taking the course just to get the recordings.
Mm.
Yeah, so I hope you take a look. And if you have any questions, you'll also see at andreasnlp.com, you'll see a contact us form, or you can email us at info@andreasnlp.com and with any questions. And Rory, who's a part of our coaching team, he'll answer, or if he's not sure, he'll forward it to me and I'll answer.
Mm.
You'll get an answer.
And if you want to attend a shortened version of wholeness training next week, like I said, if you're a part of one of our memberships, you get access to it for free. We can't buy it. We're not selling it. And like I mentioned, the lowest, the most least expensive training or membership you can be a part of is our Ultimate Practitioner training, which is only $97 a year. And it is Stephen Connirae's practitioner material, which, like I said, is the best practitioner material I've ever come across, the most complete. So if you're looking to learn NLP and get these amazing workshops with other teachers, which I love doing. I love bringing in other teachers, especially teachers who do things that are better than me or do things that I don't do. I love bringing them in to teach workshops like this. So you can sign up. There will be, if you look in the description of this video, you can find all of that. All right. Any last words you want to say before we sign off? Anything?
I just want to thank you, Damon, for inviting me on. It's been fun to chat a bit. Yeah.
My
and
pleasure.
also to meet those in your community who've joined on, and maybe those of us who found us through Facebook. Yeah, just thank you all for being here.
Okay. Take care, everyone, and we'll go ahead and close out this live stream.